Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to go through the problem sets related to LOS1, interest rates, its interpretations, and the composition to its components, which I have already explained in the previous video. If you haven't already watched it, I highly recommend you to do that, then watch this video. Alright, let's start. Here we have our first item set. An investor can invest $1,000 today to receive $1,070 in 1 year. The investor's alternatives are a savings account earning 3% or consuming the $1,000 today. First question. The required return the investor implicitly accepts by taking the project is, well, this is related to the first interpretation of interest rate as required rate of return. And we calculate it by dividing $1,070, which the investor is going to receive in a year, by $1,000. And it equals 7%. So if the investor goes through with his investment, his required rate of return is 7%. If the investor evaluates the payoff using a discount rate equal to the required return, the present value of 1070 equals, well, by present value here, the question means actually the amount that the investor needs to invest for a year to receive $1,070 in 1 year. This is the second interpretation of the interest rate as discount rate. We have already calculated the required rate of return, 7% in question 1, which is the same as discount rate. And the calculation to find the present value is 7,070 divided by 1 plus 7%, which equals 1,000. So the answer to this question is $1,000. So if the investor needs to invest $1,000 today at 7% in order to receive $1,070 in a year. Third question. This one is a little bit tricky because we have already given an alternative to this investment, a savings account at 3%. Let's see. If the investor consumes today instead of investing in the project, the opportunity cost is best described as, okay, this is the third interpretation of interest rate as opportunity cost. Remember, it is the cost of not doing something. In this case, not investing in this project. But it is not 3%. It is 7%. Because all three, required rate of return, discount rate, and opportunity cost, they are all the same. So the answer is 7%, C. Let us continue with the second item set. Three investors consider different risks. Investor A holds similar traded municipal bonds. Well, municipal bonds are basically bonds issued by local governments like state, city, and counties. Investor B worries the issuer's cash flows may not meet debt service. Investor C buys a 20-year government bond instead of a 2-year note. First question. Investor A should demand primarily which premium? Well, since investor A holds thinly traded municipal bonds, thinly traded here means there is not much demand for these bonds, meaning they are not traded a lot. In other words, it is not liquid. So this investor is concerned with liquidity, and the compensation for that is liquidity premium. Second, investor B should demand primarily which premium? Okay, let's see what investor B's concern is. It is about the payment of debt service. So the investor B worries that the borrower will not be able to pay back the debt. In this case, it's called default risk, and the premium that covers that is default risk premium. Thirdly, investor C buys a 20-year government bond instead of a 2-year note. So investor C invests in a security which has 20 years of maturity. In this case, this investor should be concerned with maturity premium. All right, item says 3. 1-year treasury bills yield 5.1%. Market inflation expectation for 1 year is 3.6%. A 1-year A-rated corporate note yields 6.4% and usually trades actively. Let's start with question 1. The nominal risk-free rate implied by treasury bills is. All right. Now, let me give you a bit of background on treasury bills. Treasury bills are debt securities issued by US government for different maturities. In this case, it is 1 year. they are considered risk-free as they are backed by US government and they are on high demand. That's why they have very high liquidity. Okay, now let's remember our formula, which was R equals real risk-free rate plus inflation plus default plus liquidity plus maturity. All right. Since I have already said that these securities are virtually risk-free, they don't carry any default risk, we can ignore this part here. And they have very high liquidity. And since they are issued for a year, at least in this question, it is said so. So we can ignore maturity premium as well. So we are left with real risk-free rate plus inflation premium. So remember the sum of real risk-free rate plus inflation was called nominal risk-free rate. So the nominal risk-free rate is actually the yield on 1-year treasury bills, which is also 5.1%. Second question. The default risk premium plus liquidity premium combined for the corporate note is closest to. Okay. To find the answer to this question, we need to compare the treasury bill with the corporate note. Okay. The same formula goes as we have written here on the first question. Now, what is the difference between the corporate note and US Treasury bill? Well, the corporate note has default risk, so we need to use default premium for that. They are less liquid than US Treasury bills, so we are going to have liquidity premium here as well. But since they have the same maturity, a year, maturity premium is going to be the same for both treasury bill and the corporate note. So the maturity premium is going to be the same. So if we subtract 5.1% from 6.4%, we are going to end up with default and liquidity premium, which is going to be 1.3%. Third question. The real risk-free rate approximate implied by the treasury bill and inflation is closest to. Okay, remember the formula. Nominal risk-free rate equals real risk-free rate plus inflation. In this case, we are going to find real risk-free rate. So in order to find this, we need to subtract inflation from nominal risk-free rate. Our nominal risk-free rate is 5.1%, which you have found in question 1. And the inflation is given 3.6%. So the real risk-free rate is 1.5%. The answer is B. And that wraps up the video. In today's video, we have looked at the problems related to LOS1 interest rates, and I hope you enjoyed it. For more content, please don't forget to like and subscribe.